Hey, welcome back to Life with Al. I hope things aren't too stressful wherever you are today and whatever you're doing. I wanted to spend a little bit more time just talking about the importance of touch, specifically in regards to our person that we're caring about or caring for that has dementia. And it was real interesting when I was reading a little bit about touch. Dr. Schanberg, who is a professor and researcher at Duke University, he has said that touch makes a 10 times stronger impact than verbal or emotional contact. So let that sink in. 10 times stronger than verbal or emotional. So touch is so vitally important. And I think that's something that sometimes as caregivers, I know for myself, I sometimes overlook. So I'm just going to be more intentional about that. And like I said in my tips and two, we really want to make sure that cortisol is lower and the oxytocin is higher, and touch is the best way to do that. But I know depending on your relationship with the person with dementia, this may look very different. But if you are caring for a spouse, I think it must be so challenging for you. And I remember, and I'm going back many years ago, probably in the mid 90s, I had a sweet, sweet couple that I fell in love with. He was an elderly man who has his own health problems, taking care of his wife who had vascular dementia. And y'all probably know very similar to Alzheimer's. But anyway, when she was getting towards the end of her journey and needed a hospital bed just so that he could physically provide care, he was so sad. And I went in one day and he was holding her hand and he said, I just really wish that I could be in the bed with her. They had been married more than 60 years. And he said, I just miss holding her. And she just seems, very nervous and she's scared. And I thought, he probably spooned her for that entire marriage. And now at the time where she was at her most fragile, and he wanted to be that strong support for her, it was difficult to do that, holding her hand over a hospital bed rail. And so I wish I could take credit for this, but I cannot. Our nurse actually ordered a bariatric bed because they were both tiny little people. And he was able to fit in that bed with her and spoon her. And he did that up until the time she took her last breath. I will never forget it. But now the good news is, they have cuddle beds, and a lot of hospice houses are using these where they are wide enough, not just for a spouse, but in fact, I'm going to put the link. I've read this article where it has the daughter in the bed and her children. So there's 3 generations in this bed, just spending time and the person was not at the very end stages, but certainly spending a lot of time in the bed. So anyway, cuddle beds is a really nice concept. There have been a lot of studies done that really prove the importance of touch. And typically those are done with newborns or small children. Lots of studies done in orphanages and hospitals. And but when I was thinking about making it relevant for us and caring, for someone who has dementia, I started thinking, we've talked about before how they really do go through the developmental stages in reverse. And sadly, as they get to those end stages, they really are more infant-like. And so I think these studies are very relevant. And one of the most famous, in fact, I learned about it in undergraduate when I was a psych major, and it just was heartbreaking then. It was so unethical, and they would obviously this study would not be allowed today, this experiment, I should say. But in the 1940s, they had 2 groups of babies. They separated them at birth, and they put a group in a sterile environment where they were given, all they needed to survive. They were fed, they were changed, but they weren't given any touch. They weren't held. It blows my mind that they even did this. I know they weren't regulated back then, but my goodness, how did researchers even think that was okay? I don't know, but they did it. And then the second group, they were in an environment to where all of their physical needs were met, but they were also held, they were talked to, they were, cuddled during the day and got what would be considered a normal amount of human interaction and touch. Well, they actually stopped the study after 4 months because the the group that was in the sterile environment and was not touched, even though they couldn't get sick, they had no signs of any physical ailments or illnesses. Over 50% of them died simply due to lack of human touch. Now we know that that is, it's referred to as failure to thrive. And so what some of you may not know is that there is also adult failure to thrive. And I will tell you, as a young social worker, I was assigned to be in a was assigned to be in a nursing home. And half of my caseload, the diagnosis was adult failure to thrive, which basically meant they didn't have a definitive diagnosis. Some people would say, oh, they're dying of old age, they've just given up. You know, back in the old days, they'd say, oh, she took to her bed to die. Okay, that's adult failure to thrive. And now Medicare says hospice cannot use that as a reason alone to admit someone to hospice because it's not a definitive diagnosis. Failure to thrive is a condition, and so you have to figure out the underlying cause of that adult failure to thrive. You know, do they have dementia, which can cause failure to thrive, or a list of other diagnoses. But please hear me, I'm not implying that a person who has dementia or Alzheimer's or any degenerative disease that has adult failure to thrive, that's due alone to lack of touch, because I would never want someone to feel like they were to blame for not providing adequate, physical contact and love, because, a lot of those degenerative diseases have wasting syndrome that come with them, that's failure to thrive. Maybe lack of touch could be a contributing factor. So in this nursing home, what we started was a volunteer program called Gentle Hands, where our volunteers would go in and do gentle massage, lotion, scented lotion on their hands and their feet. So they got a little aromatherapy too. And we didn't keep records or data on, if we felt like they had improved as far as not needing anxiety medication, or if they just seemed to be in a more peaceful state. But I think overall that was the general consensus. So that's just something to consider. But there were other studies done in the 90s once humanitarian efforts and different organizations like the Red Cross and just different nonprofit agencies were allowed to go into Romania after the crisis of the 70s and 80s, where tens of thousands of babies and just children were left in orphanages and had very little physical contact. Their basic physical needs were met, but they certainly didn't ever receive any positive touch or cuddling or being held. And what the researchers found, and by then a lot of these what would have been infants, obviously in the 80s, they had aged and were much older, and those children would rock and hum, and they concluded that was self-soothing, a self-soothing defense mechanism that they had learned due to lack of touch. And, I don't want to make a grand leap and think this is what I think causes dementia patients to hum, but I do know that it is a self-soothing technique. But I think, if we do see our loved one starting to rock or hum, which is common with dementia patients, maybe we could be more intentional about going over and, holding their hand or giving them a hug and making sure, that they're not touch deprived. But I certainly understand that all of us have different relationships to that person in our life that has dementia. And so whatever that looks like for you, whether it's simply, holding their hand more, or, maybe your loved one wasn't a hugger or a snuggler and that might just feel really awkward, maybe just giving them a manicure. And you don't have to be good at painting nails. I can tell you, when I was a social worker, sometimes I would go in and I had a little manicure set, because when you're talking with someone, if they feel like they're being interviewed or if they can't respond, it's hard just to sit and try to figure out what to do to provide comfort. And so I found that sometimes just gently massaging their hands with lotion, and like I said before, when we were working with the failure to thrive residents, but even people who were thriving in their environment, just giving that gentle touch, painting the nails, which we all know feels really good, and letting them know we're here one-on-one, looking at you, giving you unconditional positive regard with no distractions while we're touching you. I think that's the ideal touch. And even, when our person is towards the end, just knowing that they're not alone and making sure that we're holding their hand, that we're caressing them, holding them if possible, and so that they know that they're not alone in this. And excuse me, if your loved one is still in the earlier stages and up walking around, making sure that we're giving big bear hugs during the day. And I will tell you real quickly, and then I'm going to close. Sweet Gladys, my mom was a wonderful mother. Her love language was actually acts of service. Those of you who know Gary Smalley's 5 love languages, hers was acts of service. It was not physical touch. She was not a touchy-feely mom. Even though we knew that she loved us, it was not something she expressed through touching or holding. I'm sure she held us when we were little, but as you know, as we got older, and certainly as teenagers and young adults, we were not huggers. But I'm finding now that she does not mind that at all. In fact, sometimes she takes my hand to hold my hand if we're walking somewhere, because I think she needs that extra sense of security. And the other night, excuse me, I was actually tucking her in, and I laid down, and I leaned over rather, and gave her a hug while she was in the bed, and I was standing over her, and then I kissed her forehead. It was just kind of instinctual. And I know some of y'all can relate to this. We really do become more maternal and protective of our loved one. And she kind of looked at me, and because she's still pretty aware, and like, that was weird. And I said, Mom, was that weird? And she said, no, I liked it. I think we should do that more. So I just thought that was the sweetest thing. So I ramble on about that just to let you know, even if historically maybe hugging wasn't in y'all's comfort zone, not something maybe that your family did, you might want to try it now, depending on what stage they're in, because you may find that it's much different at this point. So I think that's it. I think, again, our goal is to decrease their cortisol, increase their oxytocin, and hopefully by doing that and just having more physical contact and that gentle touch, it won't even do that. It won't only do that for them, it'll do it for us as well, because obviously it takes 2 people for that whole exchange of touching. So anyway, I think that's it. Until next time, take care.